Webster 2 days in a row, you guys get the 2 paid center. What do you say? What do you think?
Blatant favoritism, I don't know.
Oh, about the
But he keeps being a centerfold, yeah. That's
I
what
haven't seen it.
yeah.
I don't want to.
Okay.
Oh, draft.
All right. Well, I think we are now live, and welcome to the Webster Town Board Workshop for Thursday afternoon, evening, June 24th, 2021. First up on the agenda is something that actually, Patty, you might be best to describe, because I know that you've interacted with Mr. Villa many times.
Okay, I'll take you by surprise there. That's
Well,
nice.
I
I have interacted with Mr. Reed many times, although I've never met him. But we were introduced a few years ago when he sent me an email expressing his concern that the flag had not been lowered to half-staff when it was supposed to be. And the way that had been handled for many, many years previously was that one of the members of our Department of Public Works, or perhaps the police department, would take care of doing that when it was pertinent to do so. And Mr. Theo was right. It should have been lowered, and it just was overlooked. Well, he was very upset about that, and I apologized, told him that we would make it right, and it happened again. So he contacted me the second time, and he said that he would be willing to take control of lowering and raising the flag whenever necessary, and that he felt that it was something that was very serious, and he wanted to take the responsibility for it to be sure that it was done right. So we jumped through a few hoops, and we had to sign a paper that allowed him to come onto town hall property and take care of that, and he has been faithfully doing that for the past, I think it's probably been almost 2 years. And this past year, I've commented to him that unfortunately the flag has been lowered more than it's been raised. And it seems to happen every other week, and he is here taking care of it faithfully. And to me, it just shows a willingness of the citizen to step up and be part of the solution. And I'm very grateful to him and his volunteerism.
So he's also very shy, because we wanted to have him in because June is,
June 14th is Flag Day.
June 14th was Flag Day, and we were going to have John Villa in to give him some recognition and proclamation. The day after, he was like, "Thank you, but I'll pass. I'm coming in." He's a young man, a little older than me. 20-plus years older. But he did say, he sent me this, and I'm going to read it. It's very short. And he said, "Mr. Flaherty and the esteemed board members, I appreciate the recognition by the Webster Town Board for my service to Webster and attending to the town hall flag. I am honored to do this service to perpetuate the town's ongoing commitment to our past fallen heroes on their special day, and whenever directed by state or federal officials to lower the colors. I will continue to serve the town in my unofficial capacity as long as possible, and heartfelt thanks for this honor." So, I hope John's watching at home. You deserve this recognition. Thank you very much. All right, next up, a little break from tradition at workshops, but we are going to have a public hearing to consider granting a special use permit to allow permitted use greater than 5,000 square feet in the LC2 district. This public hearing was set 1 or 2 board meetings ago. It was published correctly in the right time frame. So I am going to open that public hearing right now. And there's a gentleman at the podium. Is this about this?
Yeah, I am the property owner. So I didn't know if you needed like a brief overview of the project or anything like that. But I'm the owner of 1650 Ridge Road. So my name is Steve Schlegel, and I'm looking to put up a pole barn, 60 by 112 with a lean-to that's 24 by 112 down the side. We're using it for storage for tractors for residential snow removal. I was here, maybe it was March. It was a while ago for the initial request or recommendation from the town board to go to the planning board and zoning board and so forth. All of those have been approved, so I'm back here tonight seeking the final approval for the special use permit being over the 5,000 square feet.
Does anybody else want to speak at the public hearing? If you don't mind, then I will close out the public hearing. Town board, any questions, comments?
We have a letter from the planning board chair issuing a favorable recommendation for this.
Charlie, at our last board meeting, you were so judicious in your words. Can I lean on you again?
Well, this matter's been before us a number of times, so it's also been before the zoning planning board. This, pursuant to our code, it's required that a special use permit be required for a number of things, among them, if it is sought to put up a building in excess of 5,000 feet in a LC Class 2 low-intensity commercial district, and that's what this is all about. And actually, the owner of the property is actually Tesla LLC.
Yes.
You're the member.
Yeah, I'm the sole member of that LLC.
So this is a resolution, Webster Town Board. Well, I guess, first of all, we have a
I am making this motion for a resolution of the Webster Town Board granting a special use permit to Tesla LLC for land currently known as -1-62 and located at 1650 Ridge Road, Town of Webster.
we have a second.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Oh, no, I'm going to read it.
Yeah, still read it, okay.
I think the supervisor wants me to go through this a
Yes.
little bit. I'll be glad to. I just wanted to make sure that there's an actual motion on the table before I read it. Basically, this is for a special use permit for the property by Tesla LLC by Mr. Schlegel, who's here. He's seeking a special use permit to construct a 60-foot by 112-foot by 18-foot pole barn for inside storage of landscaping and snow removal equipment to be located at this property, which is also designated as tax parcel ID number 081.01-1-62. Land is in an LC Class 2 low-intensity commercial district. It's at 1650 Ridge Road in the town of Webster, pursuant to our town code section 225-16, subdivision A, subdivision 7, construction of a mini storage facility which is considered greater than 5,000 feet in such a district requires a special use permit. And I note that there have been variances granted to the applicant. They did appear before us, I think we were correct in March. Since that time, we appeared twice before the Webster Zoning Board of Appeals, April 27th and May 11, 2021, and received variances. You appeared before the planning board on May 18, 2021, and as Mrs. Capone stated, there is a letter from the planning board chair, which is dated May 20th, which states that the standards and requirements of the code 225-1687 for use requiring greater than 5,000 square feet is permitted. There will be no particular special conditions. So therefore, be it resolved that this proposed action is a type 2 action under the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, that the town of Webster has assessed the potential environmental significance of the proposed action, and the same will not have a significant impact on the environment based on the criteria established by the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the regulations thereto. And as such, the town board and town of Webster has determined that specific action is precluding further review, and therefore a special use permit may be granted to the applicant.
Supervisor
Aye.
Councilman Cahill.
Aye.
Councilwoman Collins. Councilman Abbott.
Aye.
Councilman Booth.
Aye.
All right, for the next board meeting, I might have to rethink the judicious aspect there, Charlie. I could have read that. No, you did great, thank you. Okay, well,
Good luck.
did I?
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. And thanks for being so patient through what is an interesting process, huh?
Not a problem, thanks for squeezing me in tonight, and unique meeting.
Janine, is Lexi here too? or-
Not yet.
Okay.
I can go ahead if you want.
Sure.
Okay.
I just didn't know if the beam was blocking her,
What's
so
that?
I couldn't tell if the beam here was blocking her, if she was
No.
hidden.
I wonder if she's stuck out west. She,
That's right.
yeah, she's supposed to come back on the red eye today. She
Yes.
already
Ooh.
emailed me and said that she left her laptop charger at Phoenix in the airport, so I don't know what happened since then, but. Good evening, everyone. My name is Janine Sanger, and I am the director of the Webster Health and Education Network, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about establishing a smoke-free park policy here in Webster. To protect workers and the public from secondhand smoke, many state, county, and municipal governments have implemented smoke-free laws, as you know, to prohibit indoor smoking in workplaces and other indoor public spaces. In addition to eliminating exposure to the thousands of chemicals found in secondhand smoke, smoke-free laws have also had a positive impact on helping smokers quit, on preventing children and adolescents from ever starting. Smoke-free laws actually prompt more smokers to try to quit, increase the number of successful quit attempts, reduce the number of cigarettes that continuing smokers consume, and discourage kids from ever starting to smoke. I think it is important to note that the following areas in our community have established smoke-free policies. All City of Rochester Parks and Grounds, Parrington, Arundecoit, Brighton, Henrietta, Rush, Ogden, Wheatland, and Rockport. And another important piece to note is that with the legalization of recreational marijuana, wherever folks are permitted to smoke cigarettes, they will be permitted to smoke marijuana. So that's something that has prompted us to look at this possible policy again. And I'm welcoming to any questions or discussion. I know that Lexi has sent each of you some information on this so that you've had a chance to look at it prior. But I'm open to any questions you might have. Hi, Lexi.
Yeah.
Come on up. You're not stuck out west?
No.
But your laptop charger is?
Oh, good.
So, I'm Lexi Popovich. I work for the American Lung Association. I've been here before with Janine, speaking about other tobacco control policy related issues. And just kind of to reiterate what Janine was saying, you know, we're really pro-health and pro-wellness and really to protect youth and young adults in, you know, all areas and all municipalities of Monroe County. Again, with some of the parks that, or towns that have passed tobacco-free grounds and parks, they have noticed, you know, their strive to really be a community for wellness and really protecting the environment, protecting youth from, you know, signaling that the norm is okay to use these products and use e-cigarettes and use tobacco and then along with marijuana. I think that's an important piece. So we really just wanted to kind of reiterate some of the risks that this causes in terms of, you know, just tobacco in general. You know, it's 2021, we all have established, you know, the harms and dangers of it, but to really protect our youth and protect our parks, I think this is an important step. And it just, you know, shows as community leaders, you know, what your beliefs and your mission and values are. And I think that's something that this would be a powerful step. And a lot of other towns and villages have been probably kind of moving in that direction, and, you know, they were applauded for that. So we just appreciate the time and consideration for this, and any questions and commentary will be open. Thank you.
Bill?
I have opposing views of this. I think we're taking rights away from people. I just believe that somebody that wants to smoke should be able to smoke in an open area. It's wide open land. The fumes aren't gonna spread more than 10 feet. And I just have a feeling that I think you're being overzealous in this aspect. That's just my personal opinion.
Of course. I would say with that, I am an asthma sufferer. I do run in a lot of parks and trails in the county, and as an asthma sufferer, I do run across a lot of people that are using tobacco products, and that does affect me. It does drift farther than 10 feet. In general, I just think, there's litter that this exposes, and we're not taking away the rights of people who smoke, because, everyone has the right to use any product, but we're trying to protect the people who don't want to use those products, and who don't want to be exposed to those secondhand uses. And so we're kind of just focusing on that, and, we are supportive of, whatever people's choices are, but, it's not areas where you congregate and where other people for health-related activities congregate. It's kind of our focus.
I would also say that I choose not to use those products, and if I'm in a public space, whether it be inside or outside where people are smoking, I no longer have that choice, because now it's affecting me. Yes, it might be wide open space, but if I want to walk through there, now I'm exposed to that secondhand smoke. I think this is a great move. I've been working with Gwen for quite a while, because I believe in a healthy community, and it's an idea that I support.
Eric?
I don't oppose this action.
John?
I kind of agree with Bill in the fact that you are taking people's rights away. If you are not allowing them to smoke in parks, that is a right that you're taking away from them. I don't support smoking inside or outside, but one is enough. I don't know. I think it's a great idea that people will smoke inside, but when you're outside, it's open air. I struggle with this, to be honest with you.
And by the way, since tonight is a workshop, and we're not voting on anything, certainly Charlie or Mary or Josh or Rick, Art, or anybody else have any thoughts and comments on this? I mean, these are free-flowing conversations.
Yeah, I have a couple of ones.
All right,
So,
Charlie.
I'm on, first of all, ladies, are you also talking about vaping?
Yes, yes.
So any kind of vaping, whether it's tobacco or marijuana or anything else, would be included. Are you seeking a ban in town-owned parks? What exactly are you seeking in this?
Right, good question. So usually the towns we work with, Brighton, Ronkonkoma, Harrington, they pass 100% tobacco and vape-free spaces. So that would include all, town and village areas, and obviously here it's a town, parks and grounds. So basically, they set that up because they didn't want people affected by secondhand smoke or vaping, and they were noticing a lot of youth were coming and using these products at parks, and again, that's an addiction. And with the epidemic of the e-cigarettes, that kind of pushed a lot of these towns forward on this. So yes, some places do have smoking huts. That's, I work with colleges. U of R has done a smoking hut, 2 of them, on their campus. But they're not moving towards 100% because they're still getting that drift of secondhand smoke, and people are complaining. But that is options that people do for certain areas. If that's something you don't want to take away all the space, as you were mentioning. So.
What about employees of the town who wish to smoke on breaks while they're doing work?
So most towns we provide cessation resources, or the town would provide that if they are, not able to use on the grounds, do whatever you want outside of work, but during, on town property, you're not allowed to use these products.
You stated that these other towns have, I don't know, you said, I don't know, the rules, regulations, laws, it makes a difference. I mean, a town can pass a policy
Right.
saying we disapprove, they can pass rules and regulations in the workplace, there's a lot of different things that the town can do. I mean, it goes all the way up to making it a violation, I suppose. What have these other towns done?
So most of it is just kind of, passing a policy through the town board vote and amending, code. But Parrington actually it is punitive, because they figured, we could make some money off of this. So that's the only one that is punitive. Usually we kind of avoid that approach, but, if someone is caught, there's a fine, and the town collects the money for it. So that's something that they kind of put.
Who enforces that? They don't have a police force in Maryland. Who enforces that?
It's basically like, the employers who work the maintenance, or, a self-enforcing policy. So many of the college campuses are kind of self-enforcing, there's signs and people hand out cards, or, you'll notice a lot of families, if you're in a non-smoke environment and their children are around and you're smoking, they will actually step up and say, this is a non-smoking park and my children are here. And so we've noticed that a lot as well.
Well, obviously, enforcement is a huge issue. That's a major one, and then the other parts, of course, are local town boards that do.
Yeah, and Charlie, I'm really glad you asked those questions, because I had kind of a leg up on this, because Patty and I had met with Lexi and Janine a couple weeks ago. Actually, about as we start to discern as a board the opt-in or opt-out for recreational marijuana. And because that's coming. I mean, we're 6 months away from January 1st, 2022, but the meeting conversation segued into the town park aspect, and as Lexi and Janine educated Patty and I on the fact that several municipalities have done this. So I was like, well, that's interesting. So when I go to the monthly supervisors meeting luncheon, just last week when I went, I floated the question out there, and they corroborated, several of them said, yeah, but what I was interested in is then it kind of created a 10-minute conversation of the reasons why each one did it. It's very interesting, and I was going to ask them for, can I see what did you do? Did you do a law? Did you do a policy? All of that stuff, so we are considering this in the future, taking a look at some precedents of what other municipalities have done, if you want to call it right-sizing it for Webster, because, I got to be honest with you, that handing someone a card and saying you owe $75, oh my God. I can't even imagine that. They really do that?
We usually don't push on punitive approaches,
Holy
we're more
cow.
educational, but they did, I
That's-
think it's a $500.
Oh, wow.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Last time.
Well, hey, but I was gonna get that, Charlie, and kind of just take a look at how each municipality has done it, whether it's code, law, ordinance, all these different things.
How is it enforced?
Well, that's all.
Well, that's a great-
Ultimately, how is it enforced?
I mean, if it's part of the social contract and people are just told this is not permitted, and she's relying on the goodwill of people, that's fine, but you're always going to run into somebody that is going to say,
And if you do, I mean, our police department isn't going to be out there enforcing this.
I don't think that's the expectation. It's the same thing if you think about mask wearing and all those other things.
Yeah.
It is a social, sort of a social contract. In the interest of everybody, general health, right?
Okay, right?
Well, and I will say this, you go to the golf course, you smoke a cigar, smoke cigarettes outside. I agree with you, Bill, it dissipates, or whatever you want to call it, within 10 feet. I had the experience, I'll call it, of going to a mortgage conference about 5 years ago in downtown Denver. And I got out of the cab or the Uber in front of the Marriott Marquis Convention Center for this thing, and holy cow. I mean, marijuana smoke is pungent, and it doesn't dissipate within 10 feet. And that's what's coming down the pike. And I'm not sitting here saying whether I'm for or against people smoking marijuana, because I could give a long dissertation about how 500 years ago, if things went different in society, marijuana would be the accepted way to party, if you want to call it, and alcohol would be the, one that was looked down upon. But I'll say to that details. But it does go beyond 10 feet. And you wonder, especially if we're going to be doing stuff in our parks, the enjoyment of our residents, the kids in those parks. I don't know, it just makes you think. And I'm not big on taking people's rights away and, you know, but it's something that we'll do a little more. I will get the law, code, whatever. I didn't ask that, how do you enforce it out? I mean, I can tell you, I'm gonna stand up and say, if we go down this path, we aren't having a punitive fine, because that's unbelievable. But Barry, to your point, how do those other places enforce it? Is it really kind of a social contract and whatever? We didn't get into that discussion with supervisors. But I'll get some of that stuff from them, Charlie, and kind of noodle through it and see, and bring it back to the board, you know, in a little bit more, I don't know, because it'll, I don't know, whether it'll be in parallel with,
I don't think so.
well, I'm just saying, we're running out of time.
We're on the
So-
cusp of building a beautiful park.
Very
on
good
the
point.
Sandbar. And I really approach this as more of a social contract and just taking a stance that we believe in a healthy community. And this is one step to proclaim that just a little bit more, a little more emphasis on it. And I know that we don't want to be punitive and we don't want to be enforcing it to that level, but the statement itself will still, I think, decrease the amount of people who are smoking and vaping in our parks.
Just to piggyback off that, you know, if anyone has personal ties to tobacco, and I lost 2 grandparents from smoking, related disease, you know, younger than they should have. And my dad suffered from asthma as a child because they smoked around him. Same with my brother, when a grandparent smoked around him as well. So, I mean, just in terms of setting the precedent, you know, how many people die from smoking-related disease every year and tobacco-related disease, it's, you know, it's staggering. And I think moving in, I get, you know, some smoker, they can do whatever they want, but to protect other people, you know, 3,000 people in New York State die every year from secondhand smoking. So,
Well, the school district, I know, has had a policy for probably the better part of a decade and more, of no smoking in school grounds. It seems to have worked, but I don't know, I haven't seen what the effect has been if anybody insists on doing anything exactly.
I think there are a lot, in hospital campuses, there's no smoking.
Right.
So, and there's a lot of workplaces that have gone to this. And again, we're not taking away the rights, it's just not there.
They're taking away the right to smoke there outside, so I kind of disagree with that.
actually, I have a bunch of fact sheets too as well that kind of reiterate some of those points and concerns in terms of, you know, not having a constitutional right to smoke in general. And some other fact sheets about policies and benefits that some large-scale employees have noticed, you know, Seneca Park Zoo, Frontier Field, Blue Cross Arena, Nazareth, St. John Fisher. I'm working with SUNY Geneseo now, University of Rochester. They've all gone tobacco free, and they have unions, and they've worked with, you know, so they've gone some bigger obstacles, but they've all gone in that direction. So they do have anecdotal evidence and things like that to kind of how they enforce it. So I can really pass that along, kind of how you guys kind of met through those arguments as well.
It's an interesting one. You know, I love the libertarian philosophy. You know, you live your life, I live mine, and everything, but it doesn't work in the real world a lot of times. We do affect the people around us.
Well, the policy is to discourage the use of tobacco. We had a policy of a smoke-free environment that would be there to discourage the use of tobacco, but there wouldn't be enforcement of it. So, you know, it's, you know, we have a lot of places, you know, they discourage it, they tell you smoke-free environment, and it becomes one, except for once in a while. You know, it's,
Does anybody know, like, I mean, I've been at Bill's game for 2 years, but Bill's 80,000 people outdoor venue. You smoke at Bill's game?
you don't know, it's specifically.
That's what they have, like those huts.
Yeah. With a smoke.
But if you were, that's interesting, because if you were smoking out in the grandstand, I'll call it, how do they enforce it? It is kind of
I don't think they do. Unless it's those are the one area.
Right, but if you're not, anyway, you know what?
No, you know, it all comes down to if somebody complains, then there's enforcement.
Thanks.
I'm not going to carry a card that you guys have to pay for. Let me tell you something.
That would be wise.
Dad, I gotta tell you, Dad, wow, Parenton?
Last time I checked their policy.
I gotta talk to, I think that's Karen.
There's Catherine, Mark.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And proving that red eyes are for young people. If I took a red eye last night, I would be in traction and asleep right now.
Listen, I stopped in the airport, we gotta make it work.
Did you come back from Phoenix?
I was in Sedona, actually, yeah.
So did you fly Southwest?
Delta.
Delta.
Yeah, the fires were very active when I left, so, yeah,
And how was the climb?
amazing. I made it back down safely. Yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you.
I forgot what you call it.
Half dome in Yosemite.
Yeah,
All
impressive.
by myself, yeah.
That's great.
So I made it.
All right.
But I'll send the information along, definitely.
All right.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Lexi.
Appreciate it.
Janine. All right, well, I'm looking forward to seeing who is gonna take the podium. I think I saw Diana, I did see Diana.
Hi.
I see Hal's here.
Peter is, I think, about 1 minute away, so I think he'll
Are
come
you
up.
guys gonna be like a barbershop quartet?
We're gonna try, yeah.
Hal, are you contender?
Yeah. I have to see.
Well, our next topic, agenda item is a discussion presentation by Webster Green Space Advocates on the potential November 2021 referendum.
We've kind of started to realize that was a bit ambitious, so we've now gone for 21/22. So we'll explain everything.
That's
Should I just put it here? Yeah. I do have a PowerPoint, but I don't know, it would probably take too long to hook up to
Is
the
it,
projector.
I have a flash drive.
Do you want it? Yeah, if we could do that. I mean, it's only a few slides. If I just give this to you and just start babbling in the meantime here. It's just this one right here. Thank you. All right.
I really think that through. Well, as we're setting that up, well, if you don't mind me just kind of chiming in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, stay down.
What's that? 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we met over at the rec center with Chris Philo, the Parks and Rec Commissioner, and myself. And then I somewhat see Diana as the leader of the Webster Green Space Advocates Ad Hoc Committee. You know why I do.
I don't feel like it.
Well,
though.
you know why I do. Until you hand the baton to somebody, you're the one that nudged me back in 19, and then when I got into office, you got in front of me and said, let's talk about this. So you were the, the squeaky wheel, and I mean that as a compliment. And then you, as meetings went on, you brought in Gail Bender, and then you brought in Mary Peckham. So as the flock grew, you were the common denominator, so you're the leader. And the third party at this meeting 2 weeks ago was the Friends of Webster Trails, which right now, Anna, you are the president. And it was somewhat, I had asked for this meeting because I was going along thinking, well, Friends of Webster Trails are doing their thing, and they're a very established green space trail advocacy group, and been wonderful for the town. And here's Diana and her group doing their thing, and I'm like,
We
these
should have hooked up a long time ago.
talk, and it was an interesting meeting, but I feel as if since then,
Yeah.
and maybe this segues, are they ready?
It does, it segues perfectly,
Yeah.
thank you.
Is
Do you
it-
want
Did
to
I,
do
did I buy some time for you? to
Oh,
say-
is that where it, no, you know what, we'll just, this is more snazzy than I anticipated, we'll do the PowerPoint, and then we can reveal.
Okay.
Okay, all right. It's like,
So,
we were fortunate. The projection on that.
I have no idea, I'm trying.
okay, so while Karen
Oh,
has
yeah,
set that up,
like-
just so I feel pretty good
Oh,
that, that we're not gonna in the future have Friends of Webster Trails going left and the
Yes.
Green Space Committee going right.
And we've also been in touch with, you were mentioning that color Webster green. So, you know, it was just a little group that they were kind of on Facebook saying that they had started something. And I've been in touch with them, just kind of, like what you're saying, trying to just conglomerate everything so that, you know, whatever green space groups there may or may not be, everybody's kind of going in the same direction or is at least on the same page.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it just makes sense. So, as you can see from the date underneath here, I was really keen on 2021. As I think everybody on the board probably knows by now, I'm super keen on green space, and I don't always have an accurate sense of how much time things are going to take. So I was just kind of, you know, really ambitious with this sort of schedule. But after consideration, after talking to you, Tom, after talking to you, Anna, and Peter as well, we, I think, collectively have decided that while we are going to start working on this now in earnest, we probably won't be looking to bid for referendum until 2022. Because there are so many properties on the list, while we're not by any means anticipating acquiring them all, the idea is to cast the net wide and just initially just put a shot across the bow for landowner interest and see what's happening. And that's going to take some time, and then depending on the interest we do get, it's obviously going to take some time to build relationships, and I mean, I'm sure we can all think of immediately a few landowners who, you know, it's going to be negotiation, and if it leads anywhere, then that'll be a miracle. But having said that, I'm pretty excited to be working with Friends of Webster Trails. Their priorities overlap really well with what we were sort of looking to achieve with this open space referendum, which is the preservation of the beautiful natural spaces in Webster that can be used for, you know, to the point of previous pair that were here, the well-being of the public. I think, you know, one of the things that really struck me during the pandemic was how packed Whiting Road always was. You know, it just goes to show how much people really do value our existing trail system. And I know, John, you said in a previous meeting, you know, how much green space Webster already does have. You know, that is true, but the case is that, you know, there are a lot of areas in Webster which are underserved still, you know, and just speaking with my friends on the east side of Webster, you know, they would love to be able to have more on their doorstep without having to get in a car and drive 5 million miles. My husband, who likes to bike and hike, you know, Kodiak Trail's great, he says, it doesn't really lead to anything. You don't really have trails off of it, you know, so there is room for improvement. And I think, you know, in addition, it's a great way of ensuring that these beautiful spaces, you know, stay that way. You know, I know you guys have all heard me talk about how just in my lifetime, I feel like Webster has lost a lot of what made it unique, what made it beautiful, what made it itself. And, you know, I've accepted that you can't just go in and kind of like communistically overlay stuff onto the land and say, you know, you can't sell this, it's permanent green space. You know, the only way to really protect that is to make sure that you're compensating the landowners. So I do think, there's a lot of momentum behind this right now. I think, we can capitalize upon, how fed up people are feeling with overdevelopment. You can use that energy towards this, and we can get something really great out of it. So, there's my spiel. Actually, could you put it?
Yeah,
Did you? Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, my animations aren't working, but that's fine. So yeah, so just, that's who we are, the Webster Open Space Committee. My little group got a lot bigger. Hooked up with Larry Peckham, who's the former chair of the previous Open Space Committee, who remembers very fondly. He's in Florida right now, so sadly can't be with us. But he then put me in touch with John Behan, and basically, Larry very generously got John Behan to do the proposal, which we all saw back in the spring. And Behan as well is kind of unofficially sort of acting as an expert from the sidelines a little bit too, which is really nice. So, even though we're not paying him. So, we also have, obviously, myself, Peter, Gail, who can't be with us tonight, sadly. I think she had an emergency, unexpected vet visit, which, sad. But, and then just a wider group of people from the community, which we've, in addition to obviously wanting to get the green space groups sort of coordinated, we've got representation from a lot of the different parts of Webster that, shall we say, have undergone development pressure and haven't been necessarily happy about it. So, recognize the value of preserving green space while it's there to preserve. So yeah, so basically our goal is to pursue the properties in the plan that Behan put together and see if we can't get it to a referendum next year.
So I'm Anna Taylor, and as Tom mentioned, I'm the president of Friends of Webster Trails. And we were linked up with Diana and her group. Can you go to the microphone, please? Oh, sure. I usually have a voice that carries, so not a problem. We were connected with Diana and her group through Tom, and it was a good heads up. And I think most everyone on the board knows we're a group, but we're a nonprofit 501c3 organization. And we serve as the volunteer arm for the Parks and Rec Department. And we were established in Webster in 1997. So our mission, which aligns with the Open Space Committee's mission, is to advocate for the preservation of natural character of Webster. And we do that through sensible management, education, and low-impact access. We advise the Parks and Rec Department, and our group assists by planning, building, maintaining, and promoting the trails. So as a resource for Diana's group, our board, our members, and our trail stewards are really knowledgeable about the open spaces that we have in Webster and the contiguous properties and the adjacent properties that are surrounding those open spaces. So it was great to have the opportunity to give some feedback on Diana's list and the Open Space Committee's list.
So, this is kind of just, I won't spend too long on this slide because I kind of already told you guys all about this. But, the tiered system that we have, which I'll show you when we get to the map, isn't necessarily something that we're going to sort of hold to. It just indicates kind of certain properties which have a lot of characteristics that make them especially valuable, particularly for the acquisition of, the preservation of natural beauty. So for something that's like wooded next to, Whiting Road and previously part of the tax abatement scheme, it's kind of like low-hanging fruit. So properties like that are really what we're looking at as priority properties. There are obviously a lot of other properties all throughout Webster, which, depending on what criteria they meet in our consideration, this is going to be an ongoing discussion, with Tom and the team. But, there are things that maybe we can sort of consider in addition to the priority list. I want to emphasize that we're not anticipating getting everything on the list, okay? This is that's crazy. That's too much money anyway. But I do think that there is room for a modest, an acquisition, modest set of properties, and I think we can do something really great with that. So you can see, you know, we're leaving plenty left for development, even if we got everything, which we're not gonna do. And these numbers aren't like that accurate, only because the numbers are what VCAN gave us, and they are assessed value but plus 20% soft cost. So maybe we're getting close to accurate, I guess, if you, whatever it was that you said, Tom, that 72% actualization or something?
Equalization.
Equalization, okay. And that's another thing that we have to figure out, you know, certain properties might benefit from being, not assessed, but what's the word for it?
Appraised.
Appraised, thank you. So this is all, you know, gonna be part of the dialogue, but anyway, okay.
All right, so this month, as Diana noted, we took the Open Space Committee's larger list, and Friends of Webster Trails just quickly reviewed the list and just given our board members knowledge of the properties. We evaluated the list as to identify properties that we thought would be of value for open space in Webster. The criteria that we used to evaluate the property list were, they were adjacent to currently preserved land, so we could connect trails and open spaces. They were wooded, important watershed land, land, as Diana noted, that was located in underserved areas of Webster, so that if you did have to get in your car and drive to, you know, across town to trails, was there an opportunity in an area of town that didn't have that currently, and land that was valuable for trails, that the topography, the nature of the land lended itself to trails, and it had a connection to neighborhoods. So that established the pared down list. Yeah.
And, next slide. I'm gonna actually show you the paper map, because I don't know, I'll try to explain it on here, but these properties are, all of these are like hatched, okay? These are the ones, and I think this one as well, these are the ones that Webster Trails sort of looked at our list and said, you know, these are really valuable for, you know, the expansion of the current trail system. It overlaps with our priority as well because, you know, really handily, a lot of them are wooded, are near parks, obviously, and some of them even were part of the former tax abatement scheme. And, you know, some of the interesting, you know, things that we could probably discuss, they don't always necessarily need the entirety of the property either. You know, so something like the lumberyard, you know, this front part could still be developed. You could still get a profit on that, and, you know, trails could take the back, you know, sort of wetlandy, weird area that's got a lot of trees on it because it hooks right up to the Hojek. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to consider. But that's basically where we're at, and we're just really, you know, looking forward to getting started and just kind of reaching out. We've already started public outreach. So far the response has been really positive. You know, every day there's more survey respondents, more petition respondents. You could argue that there's a bit of selection bias in the sense that the people that are going to be responding to the survey, it's probably people that really want this. You know, that's the old sort of problem with statistics. But having said that, it is really positive, the feedback that we're getting from the public. And I think you guys all know that you know, the preservation, the acquisition of green space, doing something to stop Webster from, you know, the rapidity of, you know, it's not necessarily to prevent development, but it kind of offsets it, if that makes sense. So I think there is this public feeling right now that, you know, that shouldn't be ignored. And at the very least, you know, we should try, and at least give the public an opportunity to vote on the issue eventually. So, yeah. I think, no, we don't have to. I don't even think we can. I mean, I kind of people want to see the survey and stuff, but I can go back to it. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, never mind, that's why I didn't want to do that, I didn't
I
really that was
will
gonna
say
happen,
that,
but you're fine.
You know, we're try to keep a tight time in this.
Yes, sorry,
But
sorry.
you know what? No, I was gonna give an extra couple of minutes because I was living over at the meeting a few weeks ago with the crew here, so that's my olive branch. But, look, like I said earlier, I'm just very happy that Friends of Webster Trails and the Green Space Advocacy Group, ad hoc committee, whatever, they're working together, and Chris and I and whoever else in the town, we're all working together. There's some, I mean, just the other day's meeting that, unfortunately, Anna and Diana weren't at, that Hal, is Hal still here?
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
there.
Hal
He's my
was
colleague.
there, and Gail was there. And we identified, or you guys had identified, 2 parcels that aggregate up to almost 11 acres that are 2 different derivations of donation of the land to the town. And,
That's a good word, I like that.
well, and John, for you non-accountants, donation costs the town, well, that won't cost us a penny. I guess except for in lost tax revenue because we own it and whatever it's assessed for and with taxes on it. But, so there's so many ways to achieve the end goal. And I think that everybody on this board right here, you know, nobody, and I don't know, I've never met anybody in the town of Webster that's like, yeah, let's get this town and community to 70,000 citizens.
Yeah.
We really need to blow the doors off. Nobody wants to do that. It's just everybody's got a different means to get to that end goal. I'm just glad that we've got the government, Friends of Webster Trails, the advocacy group, working on the same page. And as I said to you before, talk is cheap. Let's see the actions, and I mean our actions, Chris and me and Charlie, and what we're doing with you guys as we, in earnest, as you said, move toward November of 2022. And I think a lot can be achieved of land donation, or land accumulation, whether it's donation or whatever, between now and then.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, obviously donations aren't going to happen with all of the properties. It would be great, you know, if some of them were. I guess what I just want us to sort of bear in mind, I guess, would just be that the donation route is something that, you know, kind of can go on a rolling basis tangentially to, you know, the sort of reaching out to the property owners, getting
Absolutely.
memorandums of understanding, that type of thing. Yeah.
Well, unlike when the referendum was done 16 years ago, I know there was one initially in 03, it didn't pass, and then 05. Good news, bad news is the same thing. There are less acreage parcels of open space to consider today versus 2003. That creates a very finite group of people that we need to contact to see what are their intentions. And as I've said, I'm interested in that, reach out to those people to see what their intentions are.
Yeah, and just.
Because as we said, some of them are asking for $1 billion an acre, and that's their prerogative. They're private landowners, they can ask that. They'll be asking for it from now until the end of time. But for somebody who's maybe more reasonable and more impassioned to have the land tied to green space, well, then we should be talking to them.
Yep, absolutely, and I just would just make one more point, that, you know, part of the reason that, you know, initially I was really shooting for wanting to get it done so quickly, is because of the rate of development. You know, not necessarily saying that all development is a bad thing, but, you know, when it's happening in spaces that we would otherwise like to preserve, so that's gone, there might be even one more, that just since, you know, this was put together at the end of 2020, and so it's happening really, really fast. So I think that's just something that we need to bear in mind. You know, hopefully we don't lose too many more of these, before we're in a
Well, look at
position
the
to
glass
acquire.
half full. It's happening a lot slower than in the 90s and the 2000s.
I like the silver lining, that's usually
That's
something I
a
would
fact.
say,
That is
okay,
not-
all right,
that's a
okay.
fact, so. But thanks, gang.
Yeah, thank
Did you have any
you.
discussions with the village of Webster regarding the Wellfield property? 'Cause I know they have approximately 40 some odd acres over there. And currently, on the south portion, there's tremendous trails over there already that are being used
Really?
on Oak to I'm just throwing it
Oh,
out
no,
there
no,
to see
that's
if you
definitely
may
on the
discuss
list, like, that's definitely a big old question mark,
Right.
on our list.
It's not,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not well marked on the current map. I mean, you know the property well, so
Sure.
do I, right?
Yeah.
But it's not well marked, but it's absolutely on the table.
Right.
But the challenge, as you're aware, is there's lots of little tiny parcels. And
Yeah, in the one section, but
Yes.
I'm talking about the southern portion of that.
yeah, the larger section where the water
Yes.
towers, yeah,
Right.
that actually, it actually is
Right.
marked on the map right now.
Oh, good.
But
Thank
there's just a lot of unpacking to do with that, yeah. that
Sure.
particular parcel, so, but, yep,
We got it
there,
Great.
yeah.
We got it on our site.
So Mary and Josh, we're not gonna shortchange you, just because you were supposed to start at 6:15 and at 6:25. Well, actually, did Mary just do the Do you have a PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, really?
That one, yeah. It is. I do have a PowerPoint.
Thanks for making Karen work tonight. Well, Karen, you don't have to, we'll turn it off. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Mary, is this your first formal presentation as the town engineer? Hey.
Okay, so yeah, I'm presenting on bill permits and pre-construction meetings. So we'll start off on the bill permits. So I wanted to just start by highlighting possible concerns that could arise from bill permits. So I've identified the effect it has on drainage, our easement maintenance, erosion and sediment control, the types of fill that are being brought on the properties, as well as the origin of that fill, the disruption to the neighborhood during the fill activities, the town's ability to remediate improperly or illegally installed fill, and then the town's workforce availability to inspect the fill sites. So going in a little greater detail of those items, in drainage, we're concerned with restricting or blocking an established drainage course and how that will affect the property that's getting the fill as well as the neighboring properties. Easement maintenance, we want to make sure that any easements to the town's name are accessible by us. Placing fill over underground utilities is going to make accessing those utilities more difficult and expensive. And then we also want to carefully review any potential fill that would go into a drainage easement and what impact that could have. In terms of erosion and sediment control, depending on where the project is located, there's approximately, I would say about 2/3 of the town of Webster is within an impaired watershed. So that has a greater effect on what we'll look for in drainage and sediment control. If there's a drainage course on the site of the property and whether it's close to a identified water of the state, such as Shipbuilders Creek, the area of proposed disturbance, how quickly the property owner will stabilize. Per SWIP requirements, it's usually it's 7 days within an impaired watershed and 14 days within a non-impaired watershed. So if you're not working the earth and it's sitting still, then that's when you need to be either mulching or seeding. The property owner should also be installing best management practices. They're called BMPs, and the New York State DEC has a design manual on how to install these. Common examples are silt fence, inlet protection, filter socks, those kind of things. How steep they're proposing the slope to be. Again, that's going to affect your erosion. And then limiting stockpiling on site. In terms of the types of fill, I don't know if soft is the technical term for it, but I consider that topsoil, so that's got your organic materials in it, which will promote your vegetative growth. It's also where worms and other insects can survive in the earth. The subsoil is underneath that. It's not fertile, it compacts well, it's free of air, so really there's nothing living in the subsoil. Hard fill would be rock, gravel, concrete chunks, bricks, asphalt millings, and I would also say that hard fill wouldn't be acceptable if it had like rebar in it or concrete, if there was lead paint on it, different things that would make it not environmentally friendly. So considerations with these different types of fill, the ability to compact it. If you're using a bunch of large chunks of concrete or big rocks, you're going to have voids, so compaction would be challenging, and that falls into the probability of there being voids buried in the fill. How that could affect future settlement of the area, and then what could future development on the filled property be? Say someone fills with a bunch of large concrete pieces or large rocks and then puts some dirt on top, and then this next property owner wants to put a pool on top of it, a fence, an accessory structure. How are they going to be able to dig down and secure a fence post if there's not any compact subsoil there to support it? Another thing that could be a concern is where this fill is coming from. We want to make sure that there's no environmental concerns with the fill, whether it's contaminated, it has hazardous waste, solid waste. You don't want it coming from like a brown field. Another question is the trucking company licensed and insured that's entering the property? Something else to consider is the neighborhood disruption, the volume of material being delivered. We have fill permits where people are trying to bring in excess of 1,000 cubic yards. One truck maxes out at about 12 cubic yards, so it's nearly 100 truckloads that would be coming to that site to bring that kind of material. So that piggybacks on the number of trucks that are coming, their frequency, the location of site access. Are the trucks only accessing the site via the established driveway, or are they trying to get on site in an alternate location? How much noise is the earthwork going to be causing, and then the duration of the project? So we also were looking at how could the town remediate improperly or illegally installed fill, or fill that wasn't finished, a project that started and then the homeowner gave up on it. So what can we do to gain access to the project area, and then will we have financial backing to fix the issues caused by place fill? And then all this will take workforce from the engineering department and potentially the highway department if there is something that needs to be fixed. So there's the review of the application package and the existing site conditions, and then the frequency of inspections would be dictated by the fill volume and the project duration. So it's still a little bit conceptual right now, but my thought right now for when a permit would be required is when the proposed volume, depth, area, or slope triggers the need. When the existing drainage will be impacted, if the town deems it's necessary, or if the proposed disturbance exceeds a standard permit duration. So the application requirements as I propose them to be would be an application fee. Currently the town only collects on the permit being given to the resident. It's not collecting any kinds of fee to do the research required to determine whether they want to support or not support the permit application to the town board. description of the purpose and determination of drainage and/or environmental impacts that the fill would bring, the estimated material volume, type, and origin, the site plan of existing conditions and proposed grade changes, proposed sediment and erosion controls, the schedule of the work, the contractor and trucking company contact information and proof of insurances, a restoration plan, and then any other permits that would be required by other agencies. So some requirements and restrictions that I think would be good to add to what we do now is have the permit fee be based on a volume and duration, so it's more representative of the effort the town is spending on the inspections. We do have a couple different fees based on the volume right now, but there's really large, like from 100 cubic yards to 1,000 cubic yards, it's all the same fee, so it's not really stepped accordingly. I'm proposing that the application would be submitted to the engineering department, which would review and provide comments, but that it would still come to the town board, because I think the town board's input on the potential disruption to the neighborhood is critical in whether the permit will be approved or not. I think the engineering department can definitely do the technical review, but not necessarily the community impact review for the fill permit. So the town board would ultimately be the one providing the resolution for the permit, and they could also require that the resident go through a public hearing if they think it's necessary. Right now the permit is issued for 6 months, but I would propose that it's issued for 3 with a possible renewal up to 6 months. And then if they're going past 6 months, it would start the clock over and they would have to submit a new application. That there would be a size limitation on hard fill, so if you wanted to use concrete or bricks or rock, that it potentially wouldn't be greater than like a 12-inch diameter, so that the compaction and the voids are better handled. That the depth of hard fill is limited, just kind of kicking around the idea of only 20% or 30% of the total depth could be hard fill, and we wanted to base it on the depth versus the volume so that you don't have a pocket of all hard fill and then none in other areas. We'd also want pre and post construction photos. A lot of our neighborhoods have gutters and things like that where you have a bunch of trucks going in and out and it could potentially be damaged, and we don't want the highway department to incur those costs. We also want to come up with a better inspection schedule and a closeout process for these permits to make sure that we are reaching germination, the final grading is not causing any issues. And then have the applicant supply a letter of credit or some kind of similar financial backing made out to the town should they fail to have a successful project. The town can go in and remediate the situation. So next steps, because it is still kind of a concept right now. I've been working on this with Pat Stevens, the highway superintendent. He has a lot of good knowledge from his past experience on things of this matter, and then Tom Corbett has a lot of good institutional knowledge on how fill permits have been going in the past. So we are still working on what triggers the need for a permit, what that volume, area, drainage modification, what those stipulations would be. We also want to establish a closeout procedure for the permit. We would eventually be coming with proposed code updates to town board. And then we'd like to update the existing permit application to reflect that, establish the fee schedule, and then we did start a draft permit in IPS, which is our permitting program. It's parcel-based, so if anyone gets a building permit or anything of that sort, it's tied to the parcel. So this would also be tied to the parcel. It would be a permit on record. So it looks a lot like a building permit, but it would be a fill permit. Right now, we've been giving out the town board resolutions as proof of their permit, so this will be more of an official document that's visually makes more sense for what they're getting. So that's my fill permit presentation. Are there any comments?
I think it's a great idea, and I think you've done a tremendous amount of research on this. One thing that always concerned me, and still does concern me, is, what's going into these bills? Is it contaminated? We don't know. We have no idea.
Right.
And that one area alone has always concerned me, but, you've clearly done your due diligence on this, and I think it's a fantastic idea. I
Thanks.
look forward to, more information as you continue to work on this.
Yeah, the goal is to create more structure and more information supplied to the town from the residents so that there's less room for interpretation from the engineering department and what is going to actually happen once the bill is placed and where is it coming from, what are the potential ramifications for the site after this is done. So just kind of creating a more formal submittal process to get the permit so that it's not like I'm walking the site and saying, yeah, I think you could put a foot over here and 3 feet over here and there won't be an issue. We'd actually have like a survey to go off of.
Right.
And they'd have to really want to fill their yard to do it. But I also would say that I think there'll be a threshold where people can bring in fill where it won't be necessary. If they want to put raised garden beds in their backyard and it's not in the drainage swale and they want to bring in 20 cubic yards of dirt to fill those raised beds, maybe that's not something we need to concern ourselves with.
Yeah, I was
So-
going to ask that question. What do you foresee the minimum cubic yards being before we,
So I was looking at Penfield's code, and they say their threshold is 50, but it's also can be triggered by depth or a grade change of a foot. So there's other things that would trigger it even if it's less than 50 cubic yards. So it's kind of coming up with that structure on what actually is necessary.
I think
That we're still kicking around.
that's important. You don't want, like you said, you don't want to have someone that wants to raise beds that has to go through this whole process.
Right, yeah, we don't want to like survey your yard and be putting in a garden, yeah.
But at the same time, it always concerns me when you're driving, not only in this community, but, rural communities, you'll see, clean fill line. And there's no houses around. How do they know what's going on there?
Right.
They have no idea. So,
No, I want to thank you for your efforts in this. And I think, last week we saw 2 fill permits, and I think we saw the 2 ends of the scale. Somebody's just got a wet area in their yard, and somebody else is trying to recreate the lot itself.
Right.
And with these parameters, I think that would have been a much easier decision for everyone.
Right.
And I really liked what I saw on the second to last slide, because in my head, when you were talking about how do we know until we inspect it, and what if something isn't done properly, in my head, I was thinking, well, there must be room for a letter of credit in this process to be sure that things are done properly. So, no, I like it.
Thanks.
and the component about, the impact on neighbors is very important. It really is. So it adds structure that really needs to.
You don't know how important that.
Oh, I do know how important that is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't want trucks coming in and out at all hours of the day, and, yeah.
Right.
So thank you for all the work you've done.
Yes, more to come on fill permits.
All right.
So then, a little quicker, pre-construction meetings, just wanted to kind of go over when they happen, so the timing of a pre-construction meeting. So we don't schedule those with the developers until the following has been completed. They've gone through the project review committee, they've gotten their planning board approval. We have approved their engineer's estimate and have received from the bank their letter of credit or their cash or however they're handling that. We've issued the building permit. We prepared and accepted their SWIP, which is for sediment and erosion control, and submitted the notice of intent, which is how they get their permit from the DEC. We have the easements filed and recorded with the library and page from the county. Any special districts have been established, so if the sewer or the drainage districts have to be expanded to cover the properties, that's been completed. Their fees are paid, and they have proof of any other permits that are required, highway, driveways, if there's DEC permits, and other things of that nature. So the intent of the pre-construction meeting is to make introductions and exchange contact information, to discuss the project scope. Sometimes these projects go through all the planning process years in advance of them actually breaking ground, so it's a good time to catch up on what the intent was. And then we also review the utility and infrastructure installation and inspection needs. The town alone, this involves the sewer department, the engineering department, and the highway department. And then there's also, a lot of times, the water authority and RG&E are involved. We go over the SWIP and all the requirements with that, and then the project schedule. So I've just copied the typical agenda. So we do the introductions, the overview, we review the letter of credit, go through all the utility services that are represented in the room, go over the inspections and the coordination, how much time we need before we can be on site, whether it's a 24-hour notice or 48-hour notice, and who to contact for that. We spend a good amount of time on the MS4 requirements, that's the stormwater requirements. There's a lot of times, a lot of construction projects say that the means and methods and the sequence of construction are up to the contractor, but when you look at the actual stormwater design, there is a set sequence, and it can be kind of cookie cutter from one project to the next. The consultant will put the order of what should happen. But then when the contractor actually gets out there, they want to do it in a different sequence. An example that's happened on a couple projects, a lot of the parcels that are left in the town that are being developed have tributaries or creeks that are going across them, and it will show that the creek isn't being disturbed to get utilities across it, and then you talk to the contractor at the meeting, and they plan on open cutting it the first week they're out there. So that's acceptable. Granted, they do the bypass pumping and dam it and restore the creek bed to what it was, but they don't always look at what that sequence could be. They don't want to bore underneath the creek, so it's going through those details to make sure that there's no greater disturbance than necessary, and that if there is disturbance, that they're treating it properly. They're also, if they're doing earthwork, there's supposed to be a trained contractor on site. It's renewed every 3 years. It's training by a DEC representative, so we like to make sure that they have that site person identified. Reminding them that if there's inadequate controls, they only have 24 hours to address them. And I don't know if you guys have been on many construction sites, but they love to throw their lunch and snack wrappers in the excavator holes, so we always like to remind them not to litter on the site. So those are kind of the main points of discussion. And with this discussion at the pre-construction meeting, we've been making it clear that just because you've accomplished all this lead up to the pre-construction meeting, and we've done the pre-construction meeting, it's not your ticket to go break ground. So at the end of the meeting, we summarize any action items that were identified. So some of these examples that I have have been recently action items on recent pre-construction meetings. We want to make sure that they're flagging the limits of disturbance when they are going to go do tree clearing, that they're amending anything to the SWIP to match the actual construction sequence that the contractor is going to do in the field, that we might even go do a site visit to review the existing conditions to make sure that everyone's aware of where like wetlands are and things of that nature. So then I've been meeting the 2-day meeting minute schedule. So that's my goal, is to send out the meeting minutes to make sure that those action items are at the forefront of their mind before they go mobilize. And then once those action items are satisfied, they're approved to start the construction. So some goals that go along with the pre-construction meeting, and then other just general development in the town. Right now, the code sections of 192 and 228 don't mention a pre-construction meeting as being necessary prior to starting construction. So we've had, it's a little, they've been compliant, developers have been pretty good with honoring the pre-construction meeting requirement that the department feels is necessary, but it would be great to put that in the code so that they don't feel like they can go clear trees prior to that. We want to create a developer's guide which will establish construction and engineering standards to be enforced in conjunction with all the other existing town ordinances. I have found a draft developer's guide that has engineering specs and kind of like guidance on letters of credit and other processes that we're currently using, so I need to go through that and see what needs to be updated. But it's a great starting point, and it's like a 45-page Word document, so there's a lot of content there that we can work from. We want to update the existing town details and specifications. The details are like hand-drawn almost, so I think getting a consultant to update the details to what we want them to be isn't a big lift, and can be done fairly quickly, so that's something that I want to look into. Developing inspection reports for the engineering department to file in the IPS system I mentioned earlier. We have, the building department has inspections that get listed in IPS, but the engineering department currently doesn't, so getting those on record is a big goal of mine. Establishing an administrative point of contact for scheduling the engineering inspections, rather than having it go to the individual who's necessarily doing the inspections, just so that there's awareness across the department of what's going on and when these inspections are needed. And then we also are looking to purchase a survey grade piece of equipment that will give us the ability to verify utility and infrastructure elevations in the field. Right now, it's really challenging to check that pond elevations are correct, or if inverts on sewers and storm sewers are where they're supposed to be. So this would help us be more diligent in making sure the contractor is giving us the end product that we want. So that is my presentation on pre-construction meetings. I don't know if there's any comments.
Very thorough and long overdue.
Long overdue. And to that point, as far as the PCR meetings, I know we've discussed this, maybe not at length at a board meeting, but I know that the lack of PCR meetings, which are instrumental in any development.
PRC, by the way.
PRC, yeah. Are instrumental in ensuring that the developers are filing their letters of credit, and ensuring that the entire process is being adhered to. So to put this in a structural standpoint is phenomenal. You want to have this up front, you want to have everybody in the room at the same time discussing this.
Right.
You know, you're doing a great job, and I'm very impressed with it. So I think that going down the road, you know, as this gets implemented, developers that come to Webster will know that we're strict guidelines that they're going to adhere to, whereas in the past, it may not have been quite the process.
Right, and it'll be a tool where everyone in our department can reference and say the same thing to everyone who's asking questions, so that there's not different answers given to the same question. Everyone knows what the standard process is and how to handle any concerns that developers have, so.
I just say that, you know, it's really cool to watch. I don't know if it's the technical term. Is Josh and Mary kind of get their mojo of how to, you know, run the department and how they're interacting with Pat Stevens, the new highway superintendent. I'm walking into a Red Wing game the other night, and Art calls me from sewer and says, hey, I just got out of a meeting and Josh really was fantastic. And I mean, there's just a lot of good teamwork going on amongst these three departments, and Barry and Bill and the crew, those three departments especially, you know, the DPW, how it's configured now, highway and sewer, man, do they gotta communicate well. And when they do, when you get this type of specificity and policies, procedures and all that, we hit a home run.
A perfect example of that is the grant application that the senator sent down. And the team got together and they got that out the door in the required amount of time. That shows fantastic teamwork. The changes that we were implementing in the DPW department, Josh's department, just long. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're gonna have another
We're gonna move over to those tables.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Just start with one.
Yeah, Pete's gonna speak.
With that.
Is this something we can keep?
If Josh is interested, he comes in John or.
Yeah, I'm gonna tomorrow.
Okay, all right. Because I'll shoot over.
So if everybody remembers, back in November, Rick and I were here, with a little overview of the state of the plant, some opportunities that we saw to upgrade the plant, some opportunities for cost savings and revenue. At that point, the town agreed with us to move forward, working with DNL to do an evaluation on the plant. And off, but still got a lot of work done, and she has some good results. So we're sort of taking our time and bring this thing full circle in a very short time frame. So with us there, we have Frank Knudsen from B&L, George Bellington,
7 months.
and Pete Baker. So I'll hand it off to Ken.
All right, thanks, Art. So the discussion in November led to us being here in January. And it was a mix of different things, but we just wanted to kind of recap what the theme of that presentation was in the introduction to this effort before George gets into the details of it. And again, the focus here and the opportunity is to take what's traditionally been your water pollution control facility, or WPCF, and with this next set of asset renewal projects, transform that facility to what the industry is now calling a WRRF, or a Water Resource Recovery Facility. And I ask that you read this again and keep this in mind as we present some opportunities here. The mindset now on a WRRF is all inputs are valuable resources within your wastewater. As such, the objective is to separate, extract, reuse, or convert valuable water, energy, and commodities from wastewater while using utility assets in innovative ways to reduce costs, increase revenue, and strengthen your economy. And again, some of the ideas that both Art and Rick brought forth to the board that you need to keep in mind, and as we have, is this is going to be a new way of thinking. It's a new way of doing business, and we're looking at not only what's going on at the plant today and the trends, but also we need to look to the future, because this is a 20 to 30-year planning period that we're discussing right now. So with that, again, we've done a lot of work with a lot of valuable input and help from the operators. So I'm going to go through the goals here very quickly, then I'm going to turn over the ropes to George, who's going to review some of the alternatives that we looked at for all of the major unit processes that weren't addressed under phase 1, with some help from NYSERDA's FlexTech program. We did some additional modeling of the plant, which gave us some detailed analysis that then appeared in our recommendations. We're certainly going to be discussing some of the opportunities for revenue-generating facilities and running through some numbers, which I'm sure you'll have, Tom, some pro forma on potential revenue that could come in, and then I'll jump back in on how do you move forward and how do you pay for the project. So on goals, again, the phase 1 project, I'll point to this real quick, nearly complete. Your secondary clarifiers and all the associated pumping, those are your critical last step before your wastewater hits the lake. Those are in great shape, and they've really improved the performance. This asset renewal project is going to focus on upgrades to your aeration system, your biological treatment process, optimizing unit processes, reducing power costs, energy efficiency. That was the main thrust of the FlexTech grant that you received. And then, more importantly, your anaerobic digesters. You know, the liquid goes to the lake, all the waste solids have to go somewhere. There's opportunities here to, and you must construct improvements to your anaerobic digester system, with opportunities to optimize gas handling, to generate power off of that, and then also to bring in outside liquid waste in the form of septics or leachate, utilization of a dryer to cut down on your disposal costs, and to generate revenue to offset your operation costs. So that's what George is going to get into. So again, multiple drivers for this PER, preliminary engineering report. Top of the list, if you take a look at this photo down in the right-hand corner, this is a liquid waste stream, and you can look under your out. This is the liquid centrate that's coming off your centrifuge. So this is the part of this waste sludge that now comes off the machine, and there's so much flow, and the drains in this particular building are so old they're not functioning that the operators are basically walking through this filtrate when they're operating the centrifuge on solid seawater. Operator safety is huge. Code compliance, asset renewal project. Again, a lot of this infrastructure, like the anaerobic digester where the cover's failed, you can see all the sludge that's bubbled up and around. You're not capturing any gas whatsoever. Asset renewal is a huge theme here. Improvements to that complex are going to address increasing tipping fees, and also enhancements to your digesters will allow you to take in more waste than is being produced at the plant. Energy optimization, again, aeration tanks are your largest energy user at the facility. The blowers are woefully outdated. That asset and many more needs to be renewed. We're looking at a 20-year planning period here, which accommodates growth for the town and your outside customers. So with that, we will be bringing you 2 deliverables within the coming weeks. The deadline imposed for the preliminary engineering report, which will go to the DEC and ESC, is July 16th. So this is basically the guts of our draft report that will come to the town. The board will bless that, hopefully. We'll get that submitted. Part of that PER, which you're familiar with, is this nice sort of flex tech study. Again, that's the deeper dive into the energy aspects and the cost savings from the recommended improvements. So with that, George is going to discuss the alternatives.
Thank you, Ken, and thanks for having us back. There's a variety of unit processes that have been looked at the plant in detail, and we've had a couple of one-on-one workshops and tours and inspections with your operators and management folks. So this wasn't done in an engineering office. This was done with the guys in orange as well, and multiple other staff people at the plant. As Ken talked about, in green, the boxes are your current project that's finishing up. It's a wonderful improvement to the project. But the meat of the plant that's in yellow, there's a bunch of stuff in there that's old, that needs some help. And not just fixing it, trying to look at this plant going into this future, into this WRF type facility. One of the areas to jump to. So the headworks is the beginning of the plant. This is where the wastewater comes in, and one of the first things that operators want to see is they want to grab anything out that can clog up pumps. The headworks facility pulls out rags, diapers, toys that children flush down the toilet. And you do this with some screening devices, and this is a newfangled device that pulls more of it out. The more of that debris that comes out, the better the rest of the plant works. And then to the right, there's some equipment that's removing the grit. The grit is the abrasive, the stones and the sand that can ruin equipment. If you can get all of the grit out and all of the debris out, Rick's job gets a lot easier at the plant. Next slide. So there's some options that this PER looked at. Basically, the existing screens at the plant need to be updated. The newer technology screens does a much better capture rate. They are quarter-inch screens that literally remove a lot of the debris. Part of this project, and I think it's come from these two gentlemen, is this is our opportunity that this equipment has valves and stuff going in and out. These valves are very old, so all through the plant we're replacing valves and slide gates so they're functional for the operators. But this grit system, there were some options. We could put parallel grit systems in at a higher cost to the town. The existing grit system can work if it's upgraded. So the green box is where we landed, where we have $1.38 million of headworks work that needs to be done at the wastewater. The primary clarifiers is the next part of the treatment process. This is where the solids fall out of the wastewater. This slows the flow down, and all of the solids can get removed and pulled and then sucked out of these tanks with a bunch of pumps. 20, 25, 30-year-old pumps, flow meters, motorized valves that are all outdated, need to be updated. We were headed into this to build a fourth clarifier. As you expand, you need more tankage. We'll talk about modeling in a bit. We've taken a hard look at this as engineers. And the good news is you do not need a fourth primary clarifier. So instead of spending a lot of money on that tank, that's something that doesn't need to happen. But your existing tank needs new chains and sprockets and the new pumps that we talked about. So we need approximately $350,000 worth of improvement in the primary treatment part of the plant. The aeration system is where Rick's best workers are. It's millions and millions and millions of bacteria in that tank, and they're the ones doing the work. That aeration tank and all of those microbes need oxygen to survive and to do treatment, and it gets its oxygen from blowers. As Ken mentioned, the blower system that are providing the air are very old, and the problem is they run constantly. So at 3 in the morning, Rick is doing a bad job because the blower's running, and it really doesn't have to run that fast, but there's no controls to handle that. And then during the day, it might not be running high enough when the load comes in from the facilities. So the idea here is to do an upgrade to add some automation. And that automation will be improving the bubbles that are in these tanks. These are large tanks with a whole new bubbling system. It'll have many valves and many controls to monitor the dissolved oxygen. This is like your fish tank, how much air you're giving to the fish. But now at 3 in the morning, as you have less load because everybody's asleep, that blower can slow down. And it's part of the NYSERDA aspects of this plant, the energy savings. So instead of that blower, 150 horsepower blower running all the time, it now might be running at 75 horsepower at 3 in the morning, saving valuable dollars for Art's electrical budget. And that's being done because it's operating new turbo blowers. These blowers are proven new technology, and they respond well to all this. So we're looking at a $1.8 million amount of work in the really key operating part of the plant. We also did some modeling because initially, in fact, it's on some of the initial slides, we thought you were going to be needing much more, I'm going to say, innovativeness to get the capacity you needed. It was this IFAS system. The good news is, or the bad news, the IFAS is a much more expensive alternative, but it required a lot more town money to do it. It's not needed. We can improve your existing aeration tanks, and they can be updated to take care of the town for many years.
George, something we didn't talk about, that's like, we currently do not have redundancy on our blowers. If the large blower goes down, we have no support for it. We have very, very minimal support. So I want to make
They have perfect support of something that's too small and insufficient. And now the microorganisms do not have enough oxygen. Rick doesn't have enough treatment, and he has a violation. So it's critical to have redundancy. This is 3 blowers. One will be on all the time. Second one might be on maybe at 11 in the morning when the load is coming in from residents. And the third one is the redundant. Things break. So all 3 of these will be run and rotated by the wastewater staff. There's sludges that are generated at wastewater plant. We send solids down the sewer, and you need to settle those out. And all those extra microorganisms that we grow, eventually you have too many of them. Those microorganisms are eating the wastewater and making more microorganisms. And we have to waste those organisms in tanks that settle the solids out. These are called thickeners. We looked at a couple of options. There's some existing very old, there's an existing old thickener tank that we looked at in some other old tankage to modify. We found, in this case, the best option was to construct 2 thickener tanks in a space, brand new tanks with the infrastructure for $780,000. What's nice about these tanks, it has limited operator needs, so they run very nicely when plant personnel isn't there. So you're basically pumping liquid in it, allowing the settling. It's an automatic, low-tech tank. They've been proven for a lot of years. The town used to do quite a business bringing in some outside waste, some septage, and some liquids. You haven't been able to do that because of existing infrastructure can't handle it. To reinstate that, creating some screening devices that can take septage that comes in from areas in the town that are not part of the sewer system. When someone cleans a septic tank, that stuff has to go someplace. It would go through these screening devices to remove the stuff we talked about earlier, the rags and the debris that comes through a septic hole. So this liquid receiving is much larger than just septage. We're looking at upgrading the receiving facilities to get landfill leachate to come in, septage to come back in, and some other high-strength waste and stuff. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. But all these liquids can come in as a revenue source, and the receiving facilities have approximately a $1.4 million cost. There is an option not to do liquid receiving, just to leave the system as it is, but then you lose your revenue potential. Secondly, the stuff that does come in would go through existing pumps, and that would have continued maintenance issues. So in this case, we're recommending the receiving facilities. In the aeration tanks, you have a bunch of microorganisms that need oxygen. In the digesters, the anaerobic digesters, we do not have oxygen there. They work, those microorganisms do not need oxygen, and your existing digesters do not perform that well. Their covers are leaking, mixing is inadequate. They're inadequate in size. So we look at all this no action, and what really is a big driver is operator safety. The digesters do not meet current codes. Biogas is something you have to treat with respect, and it can be dangerous for operators. So we kind of look at doing no action on the digesters is really not an option. What we're suggesting is to take one of the existing digesters and renovate it. We're suggesting adding a brand new digester adjacent. We're talking about retrofitting one of the digesters as a gas holder and a secondary digester, and adding all the gas safety piping in flares that meet the flare that meets code. And the bottom line is this and some other technology, including upgrading to the thickening system of the digester. This whole digestion complex is about a $6 million piece. The existing anaerobic digestion facility has not had investment in many 10 years. The digester that we're talking about would be a 50-foot diameter tank. The picture on the upper left is one of these tanks being constructed. It would have mixing in it to get the microorganisms in contact with the food. The bottom is the gas holding structure, capturing biogas. Biogas is a free resource that you can capture and reduce your natural gas bill with, and needing, the digesters need to be heated. Just like us, our bodies are 98 degrees, Rick will run these digesters at 98 degrees. That's where the anaerobic digesters need to be, and that's why you need the ability to heat that. When you have all these solids and you're all done with digestion, now you got to do something with it. I wish Mary was still here. She's issuing permits to get for fill. And you have 20 cubic yards of sludge a day? I don't know, Mary can't. As you said, you can't send bad stuff. You can't send fill unless it meets permit. Rick's stuff that comes off the digester now has to go to a landfill. You do that by dewatering it with dewatering equipment. There's a very, very old backup dewatering device called a belt press that is way beyond its useful life. And you have a small centrifuge there that's over 20 years old. That centrifuge breaks tomorrow. The town of Webster is scrambling because every single day, 5 days a week, that device has to run. So we do not see, next slide, we do not see not doing something with the dewatering equipment as an option just because it's so important to the facility. We think it's essential, and the recommendation is adding a new centrifuge. The existing centrifuge is fine as a backup, but not as the prime workhorse. We buy a new and install a new centrifuge where the old belt press is. That would be now the prime workforce. Add new conveyors, and that's about a $760,000 item. This is really one of the huge drivers here. With my gray hair, we can go back 20 years, and tipping fees at landfills at $30 a ton was not uncommon. The cost for the town of Webster to get rid of its biosolids has increased quite a bit over the years. Historically, sending it to the landfills, especially where you are, you're in the western part of the state with all of this western New York State landfill capacity, it was the cheap place to go. But the market is changing now. The low tipping fee trends are going away. There is a significant shift from New York State DEC because of climate issues and other things, not just to put organic type waste into landfills. They're discouraging what they used to encourage. Secondly, there's a lot of local capacity issues now. You can't get your stuff, your biosolids to High Acres or Millseed. They're at sludge capacity. They're not looking for more. Ontario County, where you're going to now, is tentatively set to close in 2028. That's a couple years from now. It goes quick. And Seneca Meadows has a possible 2025 closure. Those closures and capacity issues are important, and the trends for the state. But really what hits home is the fees. Just a few years ago, you were paying $85 a wet ton. Your current contract's $125 a wet ton. We are seeing no contracts that are being let. They're not going less. It's going up. This is one of the trends that's happening statewide. And in May of next year, your contract's up. You'll be out to bid fairly soon for that renewal. And we hope you get a good number, but we know where this trend is going. And the trend, unfortunately, is going in the wrong direction. So one of the keys to this Worth project, and one of the drivers was discussions with staff, was drying sludge. Drying sludge is, when you see sludge come and it gets in that truck, it's hard to imagine. It's 75% water. It's just the nature of, you would think it's a lot more solids, but lab tests will say it's 75% water, 25% solids. If a sludge dryer is an evaporator, it's not burning the sludge, it's just evaporating the moisture out. And if you can evaporate most of the water out and only leave, just mostly leave the residue, then what you're sending to a landfill is a tremendously less. So, go back to we didn't want to just come in here saying this is Art and Rick and Ken and Pete and George said it's a good idea. The NIWEA organization that Rick and I are members of, just at their spring meeting, had a national expert presenting on sludge drying. This trend is now catching on. It's becoming much more common. And really what it is, it's a risk control thing. Because instead of having a lot of tonnage that you need to manage someplace, it's now a smaller amount, dramatically smaller amount, and you have some options of what you can do with that product. So we looked at a couple of options on sludge drying. For a little more money, we see the sludge dryer as something that can handle all of the town of Webster's product, plus potentially dry a little bit from some outside as a potential revenue source. So this would allow for this sludge cake to be received, mixed in with your material and go through the drying system. And the total cost for this, to go to this, really one of the biggest changes at the facility, to go to sludge drying, is the $6.5 million price tag. So it dramatically reduces the weight through different dryer technologies that are there. This is a device that would fit in half of this room. The product goes in, once again, the moisture is what you're evaporating. And you'd have a spot, not a huge truck like that, but you'd have a spot where a truck could actually dump the material in, and then that product would be pumped to the dryer to make it into these pellet type products. So that's the fun stuff. That's a lot of the operational stuff that affects Rick and his maintenance and operating workers, arts workers every day. But we also have some stuff in the administration buildings. Quite frankly, the space is a little too small, especially as staff has grown. You have temporarily fixed that with that lease trailer at $100 or $700 a month has been providing some nice conference room space, because you can't really do that in that small break room. And we do like the janitor's closet here that Rick has as your chief operator. It's a 65 square foot phone booth. It needs some space for computers, for file system, for break room, for training. And the bottom line is you're doing all this to get this office to be up to standards. The existing footprint is to the left. There's some modest increases to stretch out some walls and also to make this ADA compliant. You need to be able to have accessibility to all public buildings, as you know. For the office buildings, needs to be ADA compliant. The anaerobic digester, top doesn't, but the office does. So the bottom right of this is the ramp issues or area, and then there's a lot of configurations on locker room, restrooms, break rooms, and stuff to be adequate for staff. one of the things we sold on this project a little bit as we were kind of going out the door is there's some NYSERDA money that came to help with this study. And it helped finance some of the additional analysis. And BioWind was what that was. BioWind is a tool. This is a computer tool. I won't bore you with all those, but those are all of Rick's tanks and digesters and pumps. And this model gets set up and inputted, and a bunch of data gets shoved in. And the bottom line is you shove all this data in, and the model predicts what water, how clean the water will come out. And does that, in 20 years, as this town has some growth and these inputs put in, can Rick still produce water that meets state standards? And BioWind helps to predict that, and it also helps the engineers in sizing tanks and whatever. The BioWind model is like 150 pages of computer printouts and something people much smarter than me in my office understand. So the recommendations in pro forma for this project is to do work on this overall upgrade of this facility, to do everything we've talked about in aeration and solids, septic receiving and digesters and dryers and headworks. So all that is part of the project. Obviously, you know, projects can have no action. That's always an option. I think you would all understand why not the greatest option. It's not what we're here today. We're here to recommend you move ahead on a very comprehensive upgrade of this facility to convert it into a WRF. It's a $31 million project to do headworks, aeration, everything that we've been outlining over the last half hour. Pro forma is a financial spreadsheet with a bunch of cells and a bunch of assumptions that we have put together on this project. And you know, the good side of the project is that this generates some other revenues for you. By reinstating septage and leachate, bringing in some high-strength organic waste, some outside sludges, and some cake, the bottom line is you're able to predict some cash coming in addition to the usual sewer rent you're getting at the facility. So the pro forma has on one side of the equation the revenue that comes in. Next. And then we could really have fun going through every column and every... So we do this over 20 years. And on the right of this, in the black, is where all those nice revenue numbers are. And we could just stop right now, Ken could drop the mic, and we could walk out and say, look at all this nice revenue. But there's costs associated with this project. So on the left side of the pro forma is the project cost. The first column is the debt needed to pay for the improvements. This is not the entire improvements in this pro forma. It's the stuff associated with liquid receiving, sludge, and the sludge drying components. The stuff that's outside of the bar screen improvements and the aeration improvements that you have no choice on. So we put approximately $10–11 million of the project that is part of this revenue generating facility as the project cost. There will be more parts and pieces that need to be replaced. There's another pump, there's a dryer that is going to need to be fixed. So there's money annually set aside or in the budget for that. There's some more electricity to make these toys run. There's some natural gas to run this dryer. So those are the things that cost money. The things on the right are the things that generate revenue. And the bottom line is what does the cash flow look like? And the cash flow looks like, the cash flow shows a positive cash flow in this project in year one. Now, we don't do a pro forma, and Kenny doesn't leave with that. He actually gives that Excel sheet to the town because things change and assumptions change or whatever. All of these things have a variety of, they're all tied to fillable things. So if Art is finding that he can get 8 cents a gallon for something instead of 3 cents, he can pop that in. If electricity goes from 6.8 cents to 9 cents, he can see those changes. So it's a dynamic document that the town has going forward.
Thanks. Can I ask a quick question before you move on your pro forma? Did I understand you correctly that the project base does not include, it's not the 30 million, doesn't reflect that? Right.
The 30 million is not in that payment. Only the 10, 11 million of the dryer and the liquids receiving portion.
So that which would give us revenue.
The part that gives you revenue, yes. Just like your clarifier project last year, there's no, that's something you just had to do. The other stuff is you got to do it stuff.
Can I comment on that? John, that there's part of this that has to be done, and you kind of saw that on a lot of the left side. We have to do upgrades, there's asset removal, there's stuff that's useful, like there's safety issues. That has to be done. If this additional part isn't added, that actually pays for itself and it has additional revenue to help pay for that base project, it's probably going to affect us even more.
Oh, I totally
So-
agree. I was just,
Yes,
it'd be nice to
clarifying
see,
that.
okay, we're gonna do the whole project, right? Here's what it's gonna cost, here's the revenue, and here's the
So we would certainly think that whatever revenue might be positive,
Right.
we're assuming that that's still needed to, obviously, to pay some of the other stuff.
Sure.
And the one thing in this whole, on this pro forma, we did not lower this saying this portion is going to get any grant assistance. So there's a lot of conservative assumptions here. We didn't try to just everything, as we worked with these guys in workshops, we didn't say everything would be loaded at max and getting maximum fee. We tried to be conservative and be more realistic of what the numbers are.
Right, so the numbers that you projected in each area of this project was not taking into consideration any grant money at all, or does it?
On this pro forma, there's no grant money.
I'm trying in other areas.
We assume zero to let it stand on its own merits.
I just want to clarify.
If we did the entire project, we got a 40% grant, we'd probably be bonding about 18 million.
Right,
And
and the 40%,
the level debt payment on that is probably gonna be about 900,000 a year. So you can add another 350 to this 559 he has.
so even on a standalone, we
Where he'd be
could
at.
possibly get up to 40%.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's walk. So relative to the project funding, you a lot of involvement on the Phase 1 clarifier project, and the town was the benefactor of the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act grant for up to 25% or $3 million for the $12 million Phase 1 project. So moving forward with this project, of course, the preliminary engineering report will contain a preliminary plan of finance, and based on our experience in the project, the anticipated funding package that you could get. So, as I mentioned, the DER is due on July 16th, and that's a critical date because what you'd like to do with a project like this is get it listed in the Environmental Facilities Corporation Intended Use Plan. By doing that, that puts you in line for funding. Driving over here today, I just heard we have a deal. There's infrastructure money coming, that one of the items is water. So moving this to shovel readiness is going to be critical. So by getting this on the funding list, moving it through bond resolution, which I'll cover in schedule, you have the ability to, you can get another WIA grant, which is either 25% or a maximum of $5 million. So you can get $5 million. So that's an assumption that we would make towards the asset renewal aspect of the project. Moving forward, we would anticipate with things getting back to normal, that's a September application for a WIA grant. And part of shovel readiness and complete application is completion of seeker, as well as adopting a bond resolution for the final project. Right now, the consolidated funding application is going on. You're at a point now where you're not really sitting in a position to apply for an implementation grant. It's just an informational statement. But as I mentioned earlier, having the FlexTech component of this piece, we've been successful, and George has been the benefactor of some fairly large FlexTech grants that would look at energy efficiency, innovative technologies, biosolids, beneficial reuse, and so on. So that's another avenue that you now have available to this project, having used some of their planning. So moving forward, again, we're here tonight. Here's an introduction. Any questions tonight that come to us will be reflected in a draft PR, which will come to your representatives in written art. They will review it, will address comments, and be back in front of the board with a final PR that you would have to bless before we submit a DFC. Now, one thing I want to touch on, and I think we went through this with phase one, is you have a town sewer district. Under town law, any improvements to your facilities need to be done in accordance with Article 12.202B. So what we're going to do is we're going to structure this PR as a PR and mapping plan, which can then be used by the town's attorney and Paul to basically establish the maximum amount to be expended, the preliminary plan of finance, the estimated user costs, and it's all in there so you can comply with the 202B. Seeker would be a type 1 action, coordinated review, similar to what you did with the first project, and then once that's completed, it would move towards a bond resolution. So ideally, that should follow right on the heels of the submission to ESC. We are under contract to assist you with completing seeker. So, once the bond resolution is done, WIA goes in, see where the project's listed on the IUP. If it scores well, you'd be in line for funding next year, and then you could start design as soon as you wanted, depending on how you want to proceed. But as you know, with phase one, it's going to take some time to get the funding in place, to do the design, to let the contracts, and so on. So here's just some ballpark dates that we've thrown out, so that best case, you can be starting construction a year from now, which would be a fairly aggressive schedule. And a project of this size, once they mobilize, year and a half.
18 months to probably fully operational within 2 years.
2 years.
I think one of the things that we know right now, because the climate is progressing the project from a concept to get the design going is so important because of this, what was the last slide, the shovel-ready word, because we're finding the more projects shovel-ready, maybe the better chances to get some money. We have a couple of projects we're working on in another part of the state where you're kind of being asked, what do you have ready to go right now? And with money, infrastructure money coming available, having anything shovel-ready is having something shovel-ready doesn't necessarily mean you're building it. It just means you're ready, because a lot of these grants seem to fizzle away if someone is dragging their feet, not getting it to a finish line. So I think that just seems to be what we're seeing with some of the infrastructure money that seems to be starting to open up.
Can I just go back one thing, a few slides back, you don't have to go back to it, but you talked about, which was it was very conservative on a lot of these, how much waste is gonna come in, how much was gonna be charged for it. But the biosolids, the Class A biosolid that will come out of this dryer, it was figured just what we're still gonna landfill, but there's so much upside to that across the state, and you've been on some projects, and there's other opportunities for that.
Yeah, we show a huge savings and it looks nice, but we're still showing pretty substantial cost to the town. We know of, in the Hudson Valley, there's a sludge dryer facility. They do their sludge drying. Their product goes out the door, it's transported and removed for free. We're saying your stuff's going to cost $125 a ton, trying to be worst case for that dry product. So there are some other possibilities that can be used as a fuel source. It still has the organics in it. It could be used as an additive, a compost additive. So it could be land applied. So there's other upsides, but we wanted to, once again, we're not trying to be the snake oil salesman here. We're trying to say, if the stars do not align, does it still show some benefits to the town?
Yes. Some municipalities that you work with that have installed their dry cleaning house.
Right.
I think that's a very important component of this going forward from a cost saving standpoint. So that's why I asked the question.
So the municipality we're working with, well, first of all, no one was doing sludge drying except a handful because of $35 and $50 a ton fees.
Right.
But because of this trend, it's now becoming more common. Altoona, Pennsylvania is a current project of ours, and that is a larger drying facility, about 3 times the size of the dryer that Webster would need. And it's under construction as we speak. Delivery of the dryer is slated for October. So that is right now our current active in construction.
A municipality that we're working with already has one up and running and has shown these types of savings.
The Niskayuna project is a project that we just did almost a similar size, a $30 million upgrade on. They had an existing dryer that they've had for 10 years. Part of the project was some conveyor improvements or whatever. And that facility has been producing a dry product for 10 years. In fact, that dry product, they got rid of it for $20 a ton at the former facility that I ran. We used it to blend into wet cake. So there's not a lot of sludge dryers that we can drive around New York State to show you. Okay. We'll have to do a road trip down to Pennsylvania, where a couple of them are operating now or under construction.
Art, what's your budget for your disposal this year?
$500,000.
$500,000.
Right.
So in theory, from what we're talking about, 25% solid, 75% water. If that dryer works the way you're talking about, we're talking about a 75% reduction in landfill.
So John.
I mean, right here, you're saying only 255. But what we talked about earlier is that the sludge we're hauling away right now is 25% solid, 75% water. We get rid of 75% water. That's 75% of that 500,000 should be saved.
And these are very conservative numbers, and we wanted to stay very conservative. John, the facility that Rick and I toured back in the fall in Pennsylvania, they're on their 2nd generation of dryers, and they give their Class A biosolids away for free. They have no money.
One other thing is the other line items here is the septage, the leachate, sludge revenue.
leaching, I think as we were talking in our committee, we're probably not going to, even if it's available to us, we're probably not going to get very much because of what Wayne County's doing. Yeah, the numbers. Because the proximity of the landfills is more, they're going to go to Wayne County.
Those numbers were driven off of history, off of historical data from our plan.
We're talking about reality right now because we just had the guy from Wayne County come in talking about their consolidation. And most likely they're going to be the ones that are going to receive the majority of the leachate because of proximity. And understand that this is actually a relatively small quantity. The actual gallons per day.
I think, yeah, this pro forma, I think it's 9,000 gallons.
So we're talking,
A tanker a day.
you're talking a tanker a day. This is not a major acceptance. Yeah, so 9,000 gallons a day, 5 days a week. It's really a modest assumption for leachate. Might that be less? Yes. Might the drying tipping fees be, I think the pro forma goes both ways depending on what business model you pursue. Okay, I agree with the landfill disposal savings wholeheartedly, and I'm all for this. I just question the other ones.
Well,
if they're going to be reality.
Right, what I found in Rome was it's a market analysis, and it's because they're traveling somewhere doesn't mean they always want to, or so it's a market, and you go in and see what they're paying, how far they're traveling. So it's a lot of like looking it out and calling up and say, hey, what are you paying? What are you willing to pay? Kind of thing. So you can negotiate those, and if you don't get the 9,000 leachate, okay, maybe you take 26,000 in septic. So it's kind of like you can balance it out and pull in some other. These are loading numbers too on what the plant can take. It's not exactly, so we're saying we can take to treat 9,000 leachate and 20,000 if we don't do the leachate, we fill in some more outside sludge or something like that.
Yeah, so good point by Rick. If leachate's not as available, maybe it's a little bit more on the septage gallons. Historically, 20,000 gallons a day is happened before here. It's not a reach. Maybe that becomes a little bit more of what you bring in.
Those numbers are often what we can handle.
Art, this has been brought up a lot. There was kind of a shock back in 18, 19 when it went from $250,000 the sludge haul to the landfills to $500,000. So that was because we got into a new 3-year contract at $125 a ton. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If that contract expires in May of 2022, which is less than a year away, what's the process of going out and getting what prices are right now to see if that 125 a ton, if we're staring down the barrel of 130, 140, 150?
So the contract doesn't expire. The first 3 years expires. We have 3 one-year options. However, well, that's the question. Can we renew it at what cost?
And the problem is if you decide to go out for bid, all of a sudden you may lose that renewal price at 125 and maybe 150 if you go out for bid. So
slow
you pay the
down.
market.
Okay. I got to back this up.
Okay.
So we're in a 3-year contract.
With option of 3 additional years.
Right.
3 additional years, but they don't tell you what the price is of the option of the 3 additional years?
No. And we bid that contract. We bid it 3 times. We had 1 bidder each time.
I think you have
You
to.
can't get the drying facility up in 2 years.
Nobody knows that. What I'm saying is I think you
You have to start
you
somewhere.
have to
Yeah.
accept the reality of the fact is that they got us.
Yeah.
They got us.
It's not going to
on
get
us.
better.
Right, it's not going to get better.
Well, they definitely got us because we're going to have to pay for it one way or the other.
And so Barry, that's a great point. We're not the only ones, right? There's other little towns, surrounding us that are in the same boat.
And again, what you do is if you have the capacity, and we have it, and you say to those other little towns, they bring it here for half the price that you're gonna bring it to a landfill, I'm throwing half the price out there. I'm just saying that we could treat it cheaper, and they're gonna save money, and we're gonna make a revenue off of it.
Actually, one of the other interesting things is we almost have to take a step back. The dryer's going to do the final getting rid of a lot of water. But we're also reducing that down because we now have an anaerobic digester that's working. Anaerobic digesters, when you put a pound in, 30% of it gets converted to gas. So right now, digesters are doing something, but they're not as effective as they're supposed to be. So that 500,000 gallon brand new digester that's being part of this is actually very important. That centrifuge is very important because it dries out more of the water before it goes to the dryer. So all those steps are interconnected.
Part of the problem we had with that centrifuge was like, I don't think it's over 20 years old. I think that was built around 2006. Part of the problem we had with that was that the dewatering, the piping below it was never big enough.
Yeah.
And that always held it fast from operating fully to its capacity. Will that all be changed?
Part of the project is where the centrifuge and how it drains through inadequate floor drains. It'll actually be new piping right out of the building. So that problem gets fixed with this project.
For both the new one and the old one?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
So what we're creating is a competitive advantage. So we're thinking about today and the future.
Yep.
So one of that advantage is taking an outside septic with the septic receiving facility. State of the art. It's swipe card driven. Right now everything is manual, and he spends hours on it, and it's on the honor system.
Yep.
The guys can come in, swipe their card. How long does it take to offload that truck?
Depends how thick the stuff is, but 15 minutes, 10 minutes if it's thinner. And that swipe card is kind of neat, like you said, honor system. If you don't have the swipe card, the valve doesn't open, so the trucker could just sit there forever. So it automates the valves in operation, and it generates the billing reports.
Correct.
So
there's a competitive advantage. The driver is going to want to come there. They can turn those trucks quicker. It's a cleaner process. They're in and out. They're making more money. In concert with that is the dryer, and we would have a competitive advantage to the local municipalities. Hey, bring your stuff here for a reduced cost of what you're paying, and we can drive some more revenue there.
So what would the capacity of the driver along the lines of bringing other?
Well, the goal was to design it that during the 8-hour shift, we could treat ours, or maybe a little extended. What we saw in Pennsylvania is they would turn their dryer on Monday morning, and they only worked the day shift, and it would run till Friday, 24 hours a day. So you could take in your outside, have that treated during the evenings. There's controls on it, there's cameras on it, so if something goes wrong. But that allows you that other 16 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours in the day to treat outside water.
And part of the conservative part right now, just is that we didn't say that this dryer would be running 24 hours a day. Just once again, not to oversell it. We had a 14-hour operation, so there's actually some extra other capacity switch out.
Yeah, the dryer size, 2 pounds sludge for a day, an operational day. Everything on the access is essentially the same dryer.
Okay.
That's a basically so there'd be a maximum 24-hour output, 1.5 pounds per hour times 24. That is most of the dryer. This pro forma solution.
So any outside entity coming in has to come in on those off hours?
No, they'll dump it during the day, and then there'll be a hopper that hoppers the white spot to continue to feed the dryer.
Okay. It's like a big hole in the ground, door opens, they dump in, and then you slowly pump that stuff out. So
mixes with ours and then pumps it.
So you brought up a good point that, you go to that, hey, it's going to be 2 years out. I look at that 2 years as an opportunity while they're building the plant. That's the opportunity that Rick and I have to go out and sell our services. We can go to the towns, we can go to the industries.
We've kind of already started.
We have.
Already made phone calls just to see what's out there.
And I think, and what can we do with that plastic? Can we get rid of it for free? So we can hit the ground running.
two questions. I'm looking at the timeline here, and obviously June 24th is today. The draft of the pre-engineering report you'll have by next Wednesday, June 30th. Within that, like this aggregate $31 million any grants or anything like that, does that include the engineering costs?
And then the fees include some contingencies and the legal and engineering fees. That's all part of the 31.
Okay. Actually, I have a couple more than two. But then you have the deadline of July 16th for CWS, or what does that stand for?
Clean Water State Revolving Fund.
Of course. Right? And how did I not know that?
We had several conversations with Phase 1 on the WIA. They administer the WIA grant as well.
Right.
But EFC,
Clean Water State Revolving.
Clean Water State Revolving Fund.
Okay. And so the $64 question, isn't that the? So this is very robust and very thorough and all that. Without getting into, I don't expect you to have dead nuts accurate numbers on this, but village and town decide to consolidate, and they make that decision in the next month or two. How much tweaking does this have?
We did talk about that as a group and looking at the Biowan model. Just big picture, probably the fourth primary clarifier would come back in.
Yeah.
You've got plenty of digester capacity in this.
Digester
One
capacity.
other, right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It sounds good.
Well, no, actually, yeah, because the grit removal would be, the plan would be keep the grit removal at the village.
Oh, that's right.
The current
And
plan,
for the primary.
Right.
Oh, right.
Separate networks over there.
there's about 1.3 million from our prior effort, which would be, the estimate that I think Abella put together regarding the upgrades they would need to their headworks, which is the forestry, the grid removal. They have that in the village, it's in great shape. So the concept is they would keep out, that would remain operational, whether it's the village or whether it's the town operating that. That essentially pre-treats that wastewater, and that wastewater now kind of comes in after town's kind of works, and then we have that fourth primary clarifier.
The solids handling portion here, the bigger digester and the dryer and all that, basically you now have your solids customer. You're going to probably import less because it's going to be coming in from the village.
So we still
Yeah,
have
and I
those
appreciate you when you say customer, actually we're partners on that. Because if we do this and the village does their own thing, they will be our customer because this is the future in the village. They can't take septage in. They wouldn't have this technology. They don't have it built into their plan. So is it safe to say just you go from 31 million to potentially like 33 million, but then you go to a 40% grant potential because you incentivize.
Yeah, so the parallel or the sister grant program is the intermunicipal grant or the IMG. And as we talked, to qualify for that, you need to have an executed IMA.
Yeah.
To have a complete application. Of course, there's no guarantees on that, but that is the higher 40% grant amount up to 10 million, I think.
10 million, yeah. And I think that the village inclusion, we want some very, at mile high up, and I'd say probably close to 4 to 5 million on top of that 31 as far as additional components. There's about $1.5 million that the village that are required to kind of demolish the plant, get that up and running, the fourth primary clarifier. I think there's still some unknowns on the aeration basin, what we can do with those, but with the Biowan model, it's a relatively quick answer as far as can we tweak that existing system, can we increase more capacity, some of the infrastructure there before we have to take the next step, which would be that part of the driver, the driver of the digest process. But right now, 4 to 5 million, we think is the end.
35 million.
So you need the IMA to go for the IMG.
Correct.
I know the village boards had on their agenda tonight to vote on, to go pursuing this consolidated community system and have an IMA negotiated. I don't know that.
It's not clear right now.
It's what?
It's not clear. At first I heard they weren't, and now I'm hearing it's not really clear whether they're going or not.
I think it would be safe to say, even if the vote went to consolidation tonight, there would not be an IMA agreement in place to move forward with this kind of marriage.
No, we're not.
The July 5th, 16th date there is the one date that Kenny and I didn't make up. That's from the state of New York. So that's
EFC, you're on the final intended use plan. You have the ability to modify that project. If you amend it to your PR or submit a financial checklist, that just updates the cost. So you're not, your main goal is to get a project on that list, get it on the annual.
No, I get it. No, I do get that. And,
amendments happen, things change. And if for some reason the IMA happens in a few months from now and it can take us a different course. The good news is, I don't think, other than a couple of minor tweaks, I think 95% of what's been shared with you tonight happens either way. It's, might be, like Pete said, maybe the aeration blower has to go up from 5,000 SCFM to 6,000. You know, maybe something, but I think we're talking very small tweaks.
Not, I mean, I think anything we're looking at is something's added on, that we wouldn't, anything we would do on the town side, the village side really would be anticipating monitoring, so the aeration process is kind of wild card.
But in speaking to the amendment, even with phase one, you know, amend it prior to going in for, because it was, the original PDR was done so far in advance, it had to be amended.
That's just the standard process. The original PDR was done, you know, this is a fast track, that we did those projects are listed in the 2 to 3 years before the application.
So it's nothing out of the ordinary.
Well, Bill, I agree with you, and obviously, we don't want to wait, because we got to do something.
We got a deadline date.
Well, I know that, but I just want to make sure I understand, because I also heard that we can't spend this kind of money. Did I hear that earlier?
Well,
So, I mean,
it's a lot of money, and we have to really take it seriously.
well, that's what, I mean,
Our big concern, what's it gonna cost our resident to do this?
I guess, yeah,
I don't think we have a choice.
We don't.
Well, no, I think, you know, just for round numbers, when you did the cash flow analysis, you did on the 11 million, the 20 million that you didn't do it on is the ones that gotta be done.
Right.
They're out of code, the DEC's gonna hammer us soon.
It's an improvement that has to be done.
And I guess I've been getting the crash course in this whole thing, and Paul, and we've gotten a lot tighter understanding of the numbers, debt financing, and what it means to the EDU charge and all that stuff.
Right.
31 million less 5 amortized for whatever financing term you're thinking, 30 years divided by 17,800 units. Debt service.
But there's also the IMB, maybe additional grant.
Yeah.
I think that, you know,
And then
that,
add another 6,300.
Can we go to 40%, or are you saying we're limited, it's a lesser amount than 40%?
I'm just talking town only. So
Yeah, okay.
we can
You
get
get the
5
regional
million
license for that.
Well, and look, and it's,
$80 the individual?
it's getting late, but, you know, we were in a couple budget meetings today, and, you know, the rules are changing, I guess, as the Treasury opines on this ARPA or whatever. But we're slotted to get $4.3 million.
Yeah.
At first they said it was for water, broadband, sewer. Is that what they said?
Yeah.
And now they've added on.
Police.
Yeah.
Lost Avenue.
Is there, you know, and I think I understand, I'm starting to get a better handle on shovel ready. And you said, George, let me you go and do it, but to get shovel ready, I think if I understand, well, the board's gotta go and vote on the bond. And you can spin that any way you want to the public, but that means you've committed to the bond.
Well, it's subject to referendum, and I mean, there's still a lot of stuff that still has to go.
That's true, that's true.
The design process takes some time, and to be shovel-ready, we're not shovel-ready right now. There's not a basis of design report prepared. There's not, what do you think, there's probably 200 engineering drawings associated with it. So if you have something literally ready to go within a certain time frame, that does help you.
And George, I've learned a lot of that on this other project we got going in town. I've heard it from the state so many times, shovel ready, shovel ready. You know, I'm just, my head's kind of spinning right now that if they ever get any traction on this proposed $2.2 trillion infrastructure bill,
I'm not shovel ready.
well, that's the thing, is that, I mean, well, we're not here to talk about whether it's a good idea for the country or not. I'm just saying that if it happens, the shovel-ready project, the way I understand it, would be quicker to get some of that money.
Came on the internet today, there was proof.
Get the heck out of here.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier.
Huh?
We had a deal.
1 trillion.
Oh, so they cut it from 2.2 trillion down to
Yeah, they made a deal, but they got, there's money coming out.
well, what's a trillion amongst friends, Bill?
Hey, Tom.
Yes, sir.
I had attended a conference in Albany a few years back, and the state agencies was about financing and stuff like that, and out of their mouth, we want to give it to the ones that are shovel-ready and the ones we have already given to that utilize the money. They don't like giving it to ones that it sits there and they don't do the project. If you've been proven to use what they give you, they're willing to give you more.
Well, I also have to think that the timing of tonight's presentation, and talking about shovel-ready, and the fact that supposedly it was voted on today, we're already several steps ahead of many other projects that could be out there.
Absolutely.
Those people are just thinking about doing some engineering reports right now. We've got this in front of us.
You made a big step a few months ago getting this going. July 16th is the next step. What I've seen in a couple of municipalities, other municipalities, similar sized communities, a few of them are considering that chunk of money that came in for water, sewer, and broadband, they're actually using some of those funds to advance design to get more ready for shovel ready. So I'm just saying this, and you can hit me with that microphone if you need to, but I've seen a couple of communities have said the bonding process and getting long-term is one thing, but using some of those funds just to get the ball, to keep the ball rolling. On one of those slides, on the schedule, there's that thing called Start Design in a couple months from now. And that's kind of how we came across on this thing. So that's what kind of gets you here to try to put your hand out for that $1 trillion.
Yeast. You wanted to be a town board member.
Putting it out, you mean?
I don't know what he's talking
Wait a minute. These are interesting decisions. I think this is not for the faint of heart.
It is not.
But Ken, this thing of getting it listed, there's no commitment to that, right? It just keeps the ball moving. If we don't, then we're pushed back.
You lose a year.
So getting it listed is really, you haven't done much. You know, you've taken a baby step. Authorizing hop-in for the CFA process to go for some grants. I think next month the secret process starts rolling through to get the environmental piece. Some of these grants say, we want seeker done, you know. So there's some steps that are not saying, give Ken $31 million today. You know, there's the baby steps before that. And then you start getting into some more, the bigger decisions.
You guys take care of the secret.
Yes. I will have it all queued up for you.
So we'll have this by Wednesday, June 30th. And is this a 1 page or is it a 10 page?
It's a 5-page report.
Pete wrote it?
Pete wrote it, 162 pages.
Oh, great. No, we love Pete, but I hope Pete didn't write it.
I'm the guy who's stamping it.
Pete makes me look like a Duff Newt writing.
We're using tonight's meeting, Tom, to finish the report.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's interesting because the day after that, we have our first formal board meeting in July. We have a workshop, on July 8th. Formal board meeting on July 16th. The deadline for the CWS, whatever, which is getting it in line. Is that a good slang for that?
Getting on the list.
All right. I think we all gotta go, Bill.
I gotta go.
All right, but I'm thinking that we gotta do something at one or more of those 3 board meetings leading up to July 6th.
Keep the ball rolling,
Yeah,
whatever it takes.
all right,
Any special meetings we have to have.
yeah,
We gotta get this thing at least to CW or SRI.
I agree.
Yes, this one.
I agree.
Yeah,
The devil's in the details, so I don't know, we'll,
I think it's
Guys.
just a formal
yeah.
acceptance of the PER and master plan.
For what? By which date? 30th or by the 16th?
Prior to the 16th.
Prior to the 16th.
Yeah.
That's-
All right. Hey, I'm glad you're staying in town tonight, George, because it's getting late.
This has been fun.
Yeah.
Well,
Thanks,
Our
everybody.
world record workshap, huh? Thank you, guys.
Now you can drop the mic. They just did standing
All right.
ovation.
That's already gone by.
Hey, freaking